Alastair, my friend, welcome back to the show. Always a pleasure. And you just spent 2 weeks in Russia, speaking to a lot of interesting people from across the spectrum. What was the message you delivered, and what did you perceive back?
Well, it was very interesting, and this is a sort of generalized view taken from various and diverse sources in a way. Russia, as Russians themselves suggest, has a reputation for often waiting till the last before it does something, that it somehow doesn't do it till it has to, until it's almost, the 11th hour. And they all say that this, is a characteristic of Russia, that it also does not do that. But they added and explained that, at the end of the Gorbachev period, the perestroika in Russia, most Russians were really disorientated, and there were factions and there were fragmentation. And then actually it is Ukraine that awakened Russia and sort of brought it to its senses and created the opportunity, or created this new identity, Russia being itself again, finding what it is to be Russia again. And it was Ukraine that actually sort of animated and brought this into being. And it's created something very sort of positive, determined amongst the Russian people. No one has any doubt that Russia is prevailing in Ukraine. There's no one there that thinks, that it's not going to happen like that. And so there's a great sort of support. The economy is doing well. A new middle class is emerging from this new economy. And if you look further, I mean, the place is humming. There are plans being created for the whole of this vast region. Siberia, a source of great technical, scientific research institutions springing up there, economic things are developed. I mean, in other words, really, it's like a sort of awakened powerhouse. Very impressive.
Very interesting observations. I hadn't intended to go right to Ukraine, but since you mentioned it, our friend and colleague, Colonel McGregor, reports that the Ukrainians lost 8,000 troops last week, and the Russians have arrived with 100,000 new troops. Can America's 61 billion, two-thirds of which stays here in the U.S., possibly rescue the Ukrainians from odds that extreme?
Oh, clearly not. The front line is collapsing. We have extraordinary things going on. There's a small town village almost called Ochretino in these last few days. And in that town, first of all, the battalion that was occupying it just quit. I mean, they just disobeyed instructions and left the town. Immediately then, the command in Kiev then instructed another battalion, one with right-wing groups, the right sector, principally right sector. They arrived. They said, "We're not having any of this. We're not going to take up positions in this small village." So they went away. Then another battalion came. And they said, "No, we're not going to do this either, because we're due rest and recreation, and we're going to go and take that." I mean, and some of them are now being prosecuted for desertion or insubordination or what have you. But this is the morale. I mean, many of these, there are villages falling into Russian control every day. It seems maybe to the outside world that this is just sort of tactical advantages here and there. It's not. It's really panic in setting in amongst the Ukrainian forces on the front line, and the potential for a real collapse of morale. As this goes, more people are circled, and as you say, Colonel McGregor reported huge losses. Well, there are other encirclements taking place where Ukrainians are going to have to decide either to evacuate their positions or risk them being all taken prisoner or killed in the process. So there's a big shift. And what just to make it clear to your viewers, what what the view is from Moscow, from the defense ministry, as people have declared, is that with this panic in the front line, Russia is determined to keep the momentum, to use this dynamic. In other words, they're advancing and they're accelerating the process in Ukraine, and they're going to use it and push this situation of sort of near panic in the front as much as they can during the coming days. As I say, this period, I mean, I made the general point, but particularly after what happened in Crocus, whatever the background to that event, I mean, it has made Russians as a whole very, very determined, but very confident.
Surely, the summary of events that you've just described is known to the American intelligence community, to the Defense Department, and to the State Department. And still, they must have misled the Speaker of the House and the Republicans in the House of Representatives to scare them into voting for this $61 billion, which is an utter and total waste and merely a postponement of the inevitable.
Totally so. And indeed, I mean, they've actually seemed to have sent many. We know that many of the things that were in the package just voted on by Congress have actually already been sent. I don't know whether that's legal or not. That's for people over there to decide. But they've sent them, particularly the attack hams, and are using these attack hams so far, never very successfully. But I would just underline, we're actually moving to a very sensitive point in terms of the relationship between the United States and its proxies in Ukraine and Russia. By what I mean is the Orthodox Easter is coming up shortly at the beginning of next month. Then on the 7th of May, there's the inauguration of President Putin. And then on the 8th is Victory Day, where they celebrate the victory in the Great Patriotic War, which killed so many Russians. A huge parade. They were rehearsing it while I was still there in Moscow in this last week. Now, why is this important? Is the attack hams are just not being very effective. And they shot down, I think, 5 over Crimea or near Crimea in the last days. I don't have the exact numbers on that, but it's about 5. So they're obviously intercepting them and elsewhere. But what I think is expected is, and it's been advertised by Britain and by American and defense officials, that they would like to hit the bridge, the Kerch Bridge linking Ukraine, or Crimea rather, with mainland Russia. And, you know, there's no military point to this because there's an alternative land route with rail and road land route for logistics. No logistics go over the bridge anymore. It's entirely another one of these, if you like, so-called asymmetrical PR plans, which are led by the UK. You recall the German senior military officers spoke about it and said, oh, well, it's going to take lots of Taurus missiles to destroy that bridge, maybe 20, because of its construction. But I mean, it's being well advertised by the West that, you know, they can't do anything to sort of halt the front, the failure in the front. But let's have another. I won't say, because perhaps it's a wrong analysis, but, you know, wrong symmetry to draw. But, you know, the Crocus, I think, was conceived by someone somewhere as going to be a huge, if you like, PR disaster for Russia in the lead up to the presidential elections. Now we have the presidential inauguration coming up. Now we have Victory Day following it really hours later. Why not have something dramatic, like something like an attack on the bridge? But I think the message I would say to you very clearly coming out of Moscow is take Putin's words seriously. Take them seriously. It's not a bluff. He's absolutely serious. And I think that you may find if there is an attempt to disrupt the Easter, the inauguration, and the victory parade, you may see things happen. Oh, we'll see.
We may have played this for you, and if we did, I apologize, but it's very relevant to what you just said. This is Foreign Minister Lavrov immediately after the Congress voted the 61 billion in aid to Ukraine, old cut number 1.
Currently, the United States and its NATO allies persist in their fixation on dealing a decisive blow to Russia. They seem prepared to keep opposing our nation, using Ukraine as their last stand, so to speak. Simultaneously, Western nations are precariously teetering towards a direct military confrontation involving nuclear powers, carrying potential catastrophic outcomes.
Well, just think of that last statement. Western nations are precariously teetering towards a direct military confrontation involving nuclear powers carrying potential catastrophic outcomes. Sounds pretty serious to me.
Take it seriously. What he said is very serious. I don't think I mean, this is the message, as I said, that I would say. I mean, they're very serious about this. And all these crazy talk coming from Macron and other European leaders about how putting troops on the ground or doing some sort of big gesture to humiliate Russia just before the inauguration and the victory parade is very dangerous, because it may find we've gone up another step up an escalatory ladder in this process, and where this will take us. And with the West in this sort of strange mood of talking militarism all the time, it's always, defense expenditure, military expenditure. We're talking all of this. It may lead us into a whirlpool that would take us to war, to a third world war. This isn't sort of talk coming out of Russia. Like Lavrov is a very serious person, a very much a low-key speaker. When he says that, my advice is to European political leaders and others, pay attention. Why are we going down this path? For what particular purpose?
Last question on Ukraine. Is President Zelensky's term over tomorrow? Wasn't there a presidential election scheduled for a new term of his or someone else's to begin on Wednesday, and he canceled those elections?
Yes, that's true. But I think his term actually ends during the next month. I mean, I think the elections are supposed to be held, but like in the United States, you have the elections in November, and the office, the new president, whoever's elected, takes over in January with his confirmation. I think it's in May. I can't remember if it's the 30th of May or before, but I think it's a bit later on in the process. But lots happening in Kiev, and there's, where is Zaluzhny? Is he? I haven't seen any sign of him in London. He's supposed to be the ambassador in London, they say, but I don't think he's there. Other people say he's under house arrest. Then we have all of these battalions just disobeying orders, deserting, coming back, and some of their leaders. And I mean, what you read, I mean, it's terrible, about complaining about their leaders and the command. They just say they're, sending messages back home saying, if you get this message, I'm dead, because our commander is determined to send us into a suicide attack. I mean, I can't believe that there isn't huge turmoil, especially with these high casualties and losing village after village. Now, there may be villages, but together it amounts to really something strategic.